morning. My name, as Allison said, is Amy Stevenson. My title's a lot shorter than hers and more boring. I'm the communications manager for MICA, and I'll be conducting the training today. And my goal for the next hour is just as the title implies, it's to help you tame what is a very large, often overwhelming topic, which is social media. And my goal for today is when you leave that you just feel a little more empowered and confident to reach your goals in terms of how social media can best serve your organization. So with that, I'd like to go over just an agenda at the top so you know what to expect. And the photo that I chose for the agenda is intentional in that I've done a lot of training and I really don't like talking for a straight hour. It's not a great way for you all to learn. So I also have this is set up to be pretty interactive, which you can participate in as always, as much or as little as you want. So if you just want to sit back and listen and chill and drink your coffee or tea, that's fine. But if you want to actually take notes with some of the questions and prompts that I will have throughout the workshop, I think you'll find you'll get a lot more out of this long-term and in terms of affecting change in your agency with social media. If you're more of a typist, just maybe pull up a Word document, but there will be questions throughout the workshop that if you want to jot down, I think it would be beneficial. And if not, that's okay too. So
I just want to hop in really quick, Amy, and I maybe you're already going to do this, but I wanted to thank everyone for filling out the extra questions in the registration. So we don't normally do that. And I am one that doesn't like to answer a lot of questions when I'm registering for stuff, but people really did write in and that helped us curate the content for today. So thank you so much for taking the extra time to do that.
yes, and I do mention that later too. It made my job super easy putting this together. So you're right. So on that note, the first thing I want to make some time for today is for you just to think about in terms of your agency, what is the role of social media? A lot of times people just want to jump in and start posting and they don't step back to think about how can this tool work for me? Because really it should be working for you, not making your life more difficult. The second piece to the class is to really unpack and address what are your specific challenges to social media. And that's where the survey that Allison mentioned came in. There were some pretty common themes, 3 top things that come about no matter what size your organization is. And that is kind of how I built the presentation today, was to address those 3 challenges, so that I hope this is relevant to you, but I couldn't have done that without the feedback from the survey, as Allison mentioned. The third element to this morning is to have you take some quiet time, which I know is a rarity in most organizations, if you haven't already, to do a quick social media strategy analysis. And that's a lot of words, but really it's to sit down and ask yourself a couple questions. One is just, what is it do you want to post? And we'll get into each one of these in more detail, but what's the content that's most important to you as an organization? Who do you want to get this information? A lot of times people don't think about target audiences, and not just who, but what do you want them to do with that information? The other question around this analysis is then where do you want to post it? Because some platforms, as we'll learn in the next hour, are better than others. And so it helps to be a little more nuanced and specific about that. And then I've done training for a long time, and I hate for folks to leave and not have any like action items to say, okay, after sitting here for an hour, here's kind of my task list. Here's 3 simple things I'm now going to do this week in terms of social media that maybe I wasn't doing before. So we'll set aside some time for you to identify privately or to share what those things may be. And then I want to be upfront because we only have an hour. There's a lot of topics we're not going to have time to cover, unfortunately, but I just at a high level want to acknowledge what those might be, because they could be topics you're interested in. And then I'd also like time to make sure I have an opportunity to answer your questions and to find out what I didn't cover that you really came here for that we missed, so that if we choose to do this in the future, it may be more targeted. So with that, that's what we're hoping to cover today. And I want to thank you. We have about 75 people joining so far, and I know on a Monday it's tough. So we're going to jump right in. And at any time, as Allison said, there's the Q&A, there's the chat. I think you can take yourself off mute, and Eric and Allison are kind of monitoring that to ask a question. I'm super flexible, and I want to make space at any time that you have a question. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you or a Post-it note or a napkin, I don't care, or a Word document, the first question I'd like to have you ask yourself and share if you'd like is, what do you see as the role of social media in your agency? This is a tool like anything else. What do you want it to do for you? And this answer could just be an overarching statement, like a vision statement, which I don't love, but like one overarching statement that guides you. Or it could be a pretty detailed list. Here's the 5 things that I'm trying to get out to my community. So we'll do this in a little more detail later, but just for about a minute, I want to give you some time to really write out, what do you see as the role of social media in your agency? What do you want it to do for you? And if you want to share that in the chat, you can, or take yourself off mute. If you have this defined, I would love to hear it, because I think we so can learn from each other. So Lori talks about, let the community know we are here and the services that we provide. That's perfect. That kind of falls under that elevate your story, success stories, impact you're making. Another Ms. Herring, to educate and inform. We want to know about resources and issues. Then Emily has a longer list, which is awareness, events, etc. Donations. These are really helpful. Thank you. And I think everyone should be able to see the chat. To support the community. And Angie's are events. And Olson, for support, you can add this in the chat or not, but if you were to be more specific, in what way to support the community, with what kinds of information? Brand awareness should kind of be on everybody's list, just from a marketing standpoint and public relations of brand awareness, elevating your story. That should be on there no matter what. All right, great. That's really helpful. I love being able to read these too. We're going to spend a little bit more time on this later, but I just want to kind of get your head in that space to think about it. And it can be a list like you've shared in the chat, or it can just be, as I said, an overarching kind of directional statement if you want. And every time I ask you all a question this morning, I'm also asking it of myself, not just when I wrote the presentation, but as part of my job. So it made me sit back to think, when I started 1.5 years ago, what is the role of social media for MICA? And I took some of this language from our strategic planning document, but at a very high level, it's to elevate the voice of MICA. It's to, as a lot of people use the phrase, lift up our voice, our work, our efforts throughout the state of Michigan. So that's kind of where I start when I'm trying to get some guidance about how to use social media. All right, I don't want to overlook any more that may have been shared in the chat. Success stories, I love that. How you're making a difference. Community outreach, these are excellent. Thank you. And so it's just great to have that list kind of in front of you as we go through the presentation, and then we'll take some time to distill it even more. But before we do that, I want to be really upfront about the real challenges you all are facing. And this goes back to what Allison mentioned about the survey that you all filled out. I love this video of this beautiful young woman, because her expression just captures how we all feel when we sit down to do a post or try to learn a new platform. It's hard. So I wanted to just summarize with the survey and with other clients and things that I've worked with, that these are pretty common challenges. And the first one is, you just feel overwhelmed. Social media is a massive topic and you don't know where to start. I'm hoping by the end of the day today, once you do a little bit more strategic planning, you won't feel as overwhelmed, and you'll have some things narrowed down just a little bit more. Time is an issue. In the chat, can you guys weigh in? If we do have a little bit of a different audience, who here are just the dedicated communications person for your organization and that's all you do, versus social media is one of 100 tasks that I have to do in supporting my agency? Because time, even if it's your only role, like for me, social media is only one part of that role. So even that, I'm always under time constraints to put out quality content. So common challenges are feeling very overwhelmed because it's such a broad topic. Even if you're not overwhelmed and you have some idea of what you want to do, it's hard to make the time. And I'm going to address that today of how you can get around that. And even if you have the time and you say, you know what, every Friday from 2 to 4, I'm going to sit down and work on my social media. Sometimes you just don't have the skill set. You're like, well, I want to do this, but I don't know how. So I'm going to attempt to address all 3 of these. And where I failed, you can tell me to say, well, this still doesn't solve my problem of making more time. You know, what else could we do? And I'm really open to hearing what some of that is. I'm going to stop talking at this point. Are there any other challenges that perhaps aren't encompassed in this list that I missed that you want to share? And you can put it in the chat. Okay. And thanks again, as Allison said, for filling out that survey. It was super helpful. All right, so the first piece we're going to tackle is that you feel overwhelmed. I think that's one of the unanimous ones that was on almost every response is, I just don't know where to start. And so where I'm going to start this session, and this is where you're going to want to take some notes perhaps to make this the most beneficial time for you, is first to just do a strategy analysis. You may have gotten a list started when I asked you the question a few slides ago, but now I really am going to take a couple minutes because I think it's hard to make time to do this kind of process. Really be specific. What do you want to post? What's the content? And you can just write this on your own. You can keep doing it in the chat, whatever's comfortable for you. But then I'd like you to take it a step further. And as opposed to just the laundry list of like event planning, promoting our story, brand awareness, who specifically do you want to see that? Is it the clients that you serve? Is it the community leaders who affect legislation in your own town? Is it state level leadership? Who do you want to see that information? Is it funders, people who are donating to you? Do you want to get those success stories in front of them? And part of the second bullet of who do you want to see it is to start asking yourself, what is it you want them to do? Is it to donate money? Is it to sign up for an event? So if you could, again, be as detailed as possible with everything you want to post, make a super detailed list during this time. Who do you want to see it? And what specifically do you want them to do with that information? And I'm going to cheat and scroll through the chat while you all are doing that. And Ashley, not to call you out, but maybe Eric can help me make sure I come back to your comment about messaging. That's in the list of what we don't have time to cover, but I would be happy to chat with you, especially at the end of it, because I don't think you're alone, about crafting the message that you even want to put out on social media. That's a big one. So I want to make sure I don't overlook that. They're all really good, but some of them I know we're going to cover, but that one we don't. So again, if you don't even have time today to do it, or you're not in the mood, you'll get a copy of these slides. Be as detailed as possible with the laundry list of what you want to post, but even more detailed, who do you want to see it and what action do you want them to take? And then the third exercise I'd like you to do is, where do you want to post it? And just at a high level, you don't have to get into a ton of detail here, but it could be where you're currently posted, just list 3 platforms, or it could be 2 places you don't know anything about, like Snapchat, but you haven't done it yet. Just, we'll put a pin in that one and get into more detail, but that does go with the content you're posting, who you want to see it, what you want them to do. That goes into where you might post it. Anybody want to go off of mute to share any of their answers, or if the chat is working, that's fine too. I just want to create an opportunity if anybody wants to speak. Okay, I'll keep rolling. So as I said, I'm not going to ask you anything that I'm not asking myself every day. So that same strategy analysis, when I first started, the first element I looked at when I did this analysis is we have a lot of great training information that we need to share. So that I kind of created a category around that. We need to share training information. It's open to anyone that's eligible to attend. So I'm not narrowing down the audience, but I do have an action I would like them to take, which is to sign up to attend. And I'm not narrowing down the platforms that we use to not include. So I put our training information on all 3 of our platforms. So that's kind of my answer to that exercise. And I'll just give you a minute to finish that. I can't see you, so I'm sorry if I'm not giving you enough time. That's the tricky part. All right. The other component to this strategy analysis that will help you feel, I hope, less overwhelmed is that last bullet of where are you posting? I asked you just to write some things down quickly, but at this point, I would like you, and in your survey, some of you went into a lot of detail about this, but first of all, when you look at what you're currently using, take a moment and pat yourself on the back. What's going well? None of you are probably dedicated, trained, certified social media experts. You're doing this in addition to 5 other things. Take a moment and pat yourself on the back and say, well, since started, I did get this off the ground. This is going well. So if there's some success stories you want to share in the chat, I would love to hear those. And I think other people would too, because I think it's inspiring. And Wendy said she'd be interested in knowing what platforms everyone uses. That was in the survey, and it was predominantly Facebook, LinkedIn, and then a lesser extent, Instagram and Twitter, I would say would be the top. So again, take some time and list what you are currently using, what's going well, and then be as specific as possible with this next question of what's not going well. What are roadblocks you're facing time and time again every time you try to push this content out on your current platforms? And this is not a reflection on you. They're complicated, they're ever changing, but to identify as part of this analysis, what are the consistent roadblocks you are facing every time you go to post or you go to delegate it to somebody to post? What's the problem? And then the last part of this stage of the analysis is, what would you like to be using that you're not? There's a lot out there, and perhaps there's some platforms that you've heard about and you're just not sure how to best use them, like TikTok or Snapchat. What would you like to be using that you're not? And I want to make sure I go back through this chat in a second, but I'm going to get to one more slide because I don't want to disregard a lot of the great conversation that's going in here. So when I did this analysis for us, first of all, we use Facebook the most, Twitter and LinkedIn, and then we do, somebody in the chat mentioned YouTube. We upload all of our training, our legislative action committee meetings, and then I'm trying to work on more internal video footage of meeting Micah. What does Micah do to champion your work out there to push some of that type of content out? So those are the 4 we use. And when I did this in analysis, as an example, I don't use Twitter well. I don't use it personally, so I come at it at a disadvantage, but we really underutilize it for following legislators to retweet what they're working on. There are housing thought leaders nationally that I'd love to support their work and retweet. And I just in general don't do a good job of retweeting things. So that's when I do this analysis, where I know I have work to do, one of many places, but that's one of the areas I'd like to do better at. Okay. I'm hoping everybody can see the chat, and this, I'm downloading all this, but if there is a specific question you have, if you could put it in the Q&A about like reaching a larger audience. I have some thoughts about that, but it's hard. Reels. I just have a hard, I can't go through the chat right now, but Eric will grab some of that because you guys have great feedback. So what I'd like to ask you right now, after we just did this analysis, and I think a lot of it is in the chat, so I won't take up a whole lot more time, but is there anybody else who wants to go off mute and just ask what do you post? Who are you trying to get it to, and where do you want to post it, or to kind of verbally summarize what might be in the chat? All right, we'll keep moving then. And this is where I hope in your note taking that this shouldn't end with just the 5 minutes I'm giving you today. These are questions you could take back to a staff meeting, to your communications person, maybe who couldn't make it today, to go through them again. But it's just to start putting these questions in front of you, because it will really help with that feeling of being overwhelmed, of doing some analysis of the content, targeted audience, and then doing some platform selection if you're not already there yet. Okay. And when I did this analysis, and I've been doing this for a long time, it helped me kind of percolate up some goals that I could do for the second half of the year that I hadn't really thought a whole lot about. But I would ask you, just based on the analysis that you've done so far, what is one thing, and this I would really love to see in the chat, or you go off mute, just from asking yourself some of these questions, is there one thing that it helped you think of that you're not doing, or maybe that you are doing and it's going well, that you'd like to share? What's a goal with your social media posting and planning? And if you can't unmute, you can put it in the chat. Sorry.
Raise your hand, we can unmute you.
So Christina put using platforms like Loomly to plan out all posts ahead of the week or a week in advance. So Christina, it's like I paid you to put that, because that's one of my future slides, is a social media calendar. I don't know if you can go off mute. Is that a goal you have, or is that something you're currently doing? Okay, cool. Then I'm going to call on you in a second, because we're going to get to that. But as part of this analysis, we'll move on. But once you sit down and maybe spend more time asking some of these questions, if you can curate out of that just even one goal to do differently moving forward, now that you've thought more about the content, who you want to see it, what action you want them to take, and then challenges that you might be having on your current platforms or future, that'll help you just come up with your overall strategic plan around that. All right. So as I said, when I did this exercise, one of my SMART goals when I started was to take that a little bit more specifically. Is one Micah example is I made a commitment to post on all 3 of our platforms every Tuesday and Thursday. It's hashtag Training Tuesday, hashtag Training Thursday, because I like alliteration. Any training related posts. So that's what I'm posting. To encourage folks, I'm not narrowing it down because it's open to everybody, but I am asking them to do something specific, to sign up for upcoming training or to visit our YouTube channel to view past training. So that's a SMART goal that I put together to make sure I was really clear and didn't feel so overwhelmed about where to start with all this content. That was one very clear goal that I made for myself to try to do twice a week with Allison's help on training. Another goal I wanted to share was one that's not going well, is I need to go out on Twitter and find some legislators, as an example, that are helping with Lisa Chapman, our Director of Public Policy, who've written the source of income legislation. This is really specific. We don't follow them on Twitter at all, and I should be following them and retweeting what they're doing. So that is a specific and attainable goal I can do this afternoon. I just need to write it down and do it. So if you sit down at a later time and go through the strategy creation, if you can just be as specific and make sure it's attainable within the bandwidth that you have. And there's other challenges I know we haven't gotten to yet about time and skill set, but you first have to come up with what your goals are with social media specifically. And going through that analysis that we just walked through will help you do that. All right. And the person in the chat earlier brought this up. Oh, sorry. And one of the challenges that we talked about, besides feeling overwhelmed and having time. And if you take nothing else away from this training, if you forget my name 5 minutes after we're done, I won't take it personally, but I'm begging you, if you're not currently, to create a social media calendar. And somebody already brought one up, Loomly, but I'll talk about some specific ones also. But just to start at the beginning, a social media calendar is just any kind of tool that you use, but it helps you make sure that you have a date and time that you're going to have your posts go live, where you want it to go, because not everything you put out may be on all the social media platforms that you have. Also, what are you going to need to do that post? Who's got to write it for you if it's not you? And that was one of the comments in there about coming up with content. It's a lot easier to curate that if you plan in advance. Not always, but typically. And then what creative assets are you going to need? Do you need to get a photo from an event maybe that took place? Is there a video you'd like to include? So by having a social media calendar, it forces you to sit down and curate some of this in advance instead of trying to do it on the fly with your 100 other tasks that you have going on at your job. And so I'm going to ask, and it's in the chat a little bit, but if you currently use one, first of all, congratulations. You should have that back up in your analysis about what's going well. Pat yourself on the back about that. If you're currently using one, you're ahead of the game. The other thing I want to stress about a social media calendar is it literally can be on anything. And, oh, I'm sorry. The last piece about a social media calendar is it also forces you to think about who do you need to tag, like other agencies or federal organizations, which will expand your reach substantially. And what do you need to link to that post? So it's like a checklist to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you go to post, and you can sit down and do it all at one time. These are some other benefits about a social media calendar, and I'm going to ask for people to chime in who are currently using one. But I equate it to, in the best case scenario, you'd never run to the grocery store without a grocery list. Otherwise, it's chaos and you end up buying too much and feeling overwhelmed, and you don't get what you came for if you don't have a list. A social media calendar is kind of the same thing. It really helps you get organized before you sit down to post. The biggest benefit from this list I want to stress is it makes sure that you're posting consistently. It's number 2. So a lot of times you're on a roll in the first 2 weeks of the month, everything's going well, and then you get busy with an event or you go on vacation and then there's a gap. If you're not using some kind of social media calendar where you're planning things in advance, that really negatively impacts your reach and your engagement, 2 terms you've probably heard about. So having a social media calendar helps you plan it all out in advance around holidays, around times you'll be gone on vacation or just get busy at work. So these are some of the benefits to a social media calendar. Oh, Christina, I'm going to have you teach the class with me next time because you're killing it. She put about Loomly with their built-in analysis. They help you choose the best timing. So let me talk about that in a minute, but I could talk for 2 hours about social media calendars. They're so beneficial. So, whoops, sorry. A social media calendar, literally, I could hold it up, but you can't see it on my camera. The calendar down in the lower right-hand corner, I pull out in November with Post-its, and I map mine out for the year around when is the Breakfast of Champions, when is Advocacy Day, when is Allison going to have her baby? So I know I get all this training information beforehand. I literally start the year with a big paper calendar and Post-its. So anything's possible to do you can do it on a napkin, I don't care, but to at least write it down. So start with the calendar. If you're more paper-based, that's fine. I was going to hold it up, but you can't see it on the camera. But there's other tools. Loomly I'm the least familiar with, so I'm excited to hear from Christina about that. But maybe you're just a spreadsheet person. Use Google Sheets. Do a sheet that has Monday through Friday across the top, the dates of the month this way. And then in each cell, just do some planning around when you want to post things. Color code it if it's for events versus branding versus fundraising. You can get as fancy or as simple with it as you want. Simple is fine. Start somewhere and just do a simple spreadsheet. Another tool, if you're just Facebook predominant, their Meta for Business has a built-in social media calendar that's super easy to use. It also links with Instagram if you use that. That's built right into Facebook. And then of course there's Hootsuite. So to get over that hurdle about I never have enough time, and there's some other related things to that about we have too many hands in the pot managing our social media. I don't know who's posting what at what time. A lot of the comments in the chat about your challenges, having a centralized tool would help you get around that. So I really want to stop talking now and hear about Loomly, and those of you that use other tools, if you can raise your hand. So Eric could unmute you and share how that's going.
Hello. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, great. My name is Christina. I'm the social media coordinator at the Chaldean News, the Chaldean Community Foundation, and the Chaldean American Chamber of Commerce here in Metro Detroit. And we use Loomly predominantly for a lot of our social media posting. It's really easy. It's very user friendly. I had experience with other platforms like Hootsuite and Metricool, but I found that Loomly was the most straightforward. So you can basically just plan out each post by the month, do like a quick edit, type out what post you want to do, and then later on go ahead and formally edit whatever you want to include in that post. You can also choose multiple platforms to post it on. So TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, anything that has really been mentioned or that you can think of. And you can also edit it so that it posts at different times depending on what is suggested based on their analysis of your account, or to different audiences and things like that as well, which has really made a significant difference in my time and doing the social media for these organizations, because catering it around that and knowing how that reflects a lot of what is accurate really tends to show a big difference in how our audience is reached and the progress that we've been making through our social media platforms.
Thank you so much, Christina. I've heard of Loomly. I've never used it. And one of the comments in the chat was that the challenge of expanding your reach, and the timing in which you do a post has a lot to do with that. And these tools, as she mentioned, will tell you optimal posting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I do a lot of posts over the weekend because some folks don't have time at work to check. And it'll tell you when it's optimal for that as well. It's super helpful. I want to try to share my screen to show you a Hootsuite one, but I think I'm going to wait for a second. But one of the issues in chat also was I have multiple people working on my social media and I don't know what's been done. And that would allow you to see the posts that are draft from other people and approve them and kind of automate that process a little bit. I'm the only one doing it, so I haven't done that personally, but people who have 2 or 3, like volunteers, for example, you can set them up with a certain security clearance or authorization, and they can at least create it. And then you can go in and do the final stamp of approval and post it. Thank you, Christina. You also read my mind about posting the cost. Hootsuite has a nonprofit. I don't work for them, so check out Loomly. I don't care. But often, always tell them you're from a nonprofit when you look up the pricing. And I will tell you, and Christina, you can voice it if you disagree, whatever it is per month is worth it in the savings to your time. The main thing is if you support more than one platform, you're posting once and pushing it out to as virtually as many platforms as you support. And so I don't know if anybody's still going to like each one separately and doing it, but if you are, stop, because that is so inefficient in terms of the use of your time. These social media calendar platforms and planning platforms will allow you to post once and then push it out to whomever you support. Any Hootsuite users or more Loomly users or anybody else that wants to chat? Somebody mentioned that they use a Google Sheet plan. It's free and it's user friendly. And then they use Meta to schedule for Facebook, which is very user friendly also. So when you get a copy of these slides, you'll see the different logos. I'll add Loomly before I maybe send it back out, and you all can check that out. All right. So the two I use when we talk about Micah, that's kind of the next step in this high level analysis, looking at what you post, who you're posting it to. Then you need to pick a tool to plan around it, is to then take that calendar and really come up with your categories that you plug into the different days. And so when I started, we've done social media in the past, but I really wanted to elevate the frequency in which we posted and the scope of the content that we were posting. So I made, similar to what I asked you all to do today, I made a massive Excel spreadsheet of all the stuff people were sending me to post. It could be HUD funding alerts down to, what is a shelter down the street doing that we might want to promote. And I came up with, in our case, 7 broad categories that would help me get my arms around all this information so I didn't feel so overwhelmed. Your categories would look different. Might be just events, or you'll need to sit down and really come up with what those are. But to give you a real life example, I have Membership Monday. It's literally the hashtag Membership Monday. And so anything I want to push out on behalf of Allison as our membership chair to promote our membership, I do on Mondays. I have a set of graphics that go with it, and I can schedule all that in advance. And I don't even have to think about it Monday morning typically, because I have it scheduled. I have training Tuesdays and Thursdays. Literally that's the hashtag too, but every time you see that heading on a post, Training Tuesday, you will know it's about what class is coming up, how to register, or what class has recently been put on our YouTube channel that you can view. I have funding alert. Usually it's funding alert Friday because I like alliteration, but I put it out often as soon as I get it if it's time sensitive. A big category is agency partner news. It's important to me when I say elevate the voice of Micah. It's also the partners we support to be collaborative. So from HUD to Mishta to you on this call, if there's something I see that you're doing, I will put agency partner news and then a dash, and then I'll put your name and I repost it to get that to a broader audience. And I tag you if at all possible. Another category is Micah in the media. So anytime Lisa's, let's say our director of public policy is getting interviewed, I have a title, it's called Micah in the media. And then I put the media outlet, WLNS, and then I'll have 2 or 3 sentences and then a link. But I have a template so that anytime I see that somebody's in the press from Micah, I can just plug that in. That I can't always plan in advance, but I know what it's going to look like. Advocacy alert is Lisa, again, our director of public policy, will send me something and say, hey, this bill's on the floor. We need folks to call their legislator. So I have a template for that. I have an image I try to use over and over again so that when it's the woman with the megaphone with the pink background, you're going to be asked to do something to take action. And then the last category was I found not a lot of people knew the names with the faces behind Micah. So seasonally, if my calendar looks a little sparse, I have a Meet Micah, which is a photo of the person and 3 to 5 sentences that they wrote about what they do. So I can kind of plug and play with these topics into my overall calendar, and it saves me a ton of time. So I want to have time for questions because this is such a broad topic, but the the exercise I would ask you to do either here or before you get too far down the road is when you've done that analysis of your whole laundry list of what you want to post, and then you pick a social media planning tool that works for you, don't just go off now and start randomly posting. Try to come up with some broader categories that those individual elements of content would fall under. And just think about what will you typically need every time you post that. So like training Tuesdays and Thursdays, I know I'm going to need the link to either the YouTube training that's already done, or I'm going to need the registration link to allow folks to register. For funding alerts, I'll need the link to take you to the, let's say, Mishta web page, so you know where to go to apply, and I'll need the logo from that agency so you can readily see, oh, this is a MSHDA opportunity. So it just helps me get organized so that as that stuff comes across my desk without a lot of notice, I have templates for each category so I can kind of plug and play as the content comes through. What questions do you have before I go any further about any of this? I'm talking a lot more than I meant to. But what questions do you have that I haven't covered so far? All right, I'll take that because I'm doing a fantastic job, or so Cindy has to. Oh.
There's specific time of day that's best to post, and then we also have what templates do you use?
So, thank you. So the specific time of day, that really will be made evident to you if you choose like Loomly or Hootsuite. They tell you, they outline it in a darker frame in your calendar, like optimal posting at 4 o'clock. So I rely on that to tell me. And then also just like I avoid Mondays at 8 a.m. because I think most people are probably not on social media at that time. They're checking emails and things. So I use my social media tool to tell me the best time of day to post. What templates do you use? There's a tool, it's on a slide I have next, called Canva. But some of it, Catherine asked, what templates do you use for these categories? Some of it is just, it's a written kind of framework. Like I just write it out once and then I can kind of insert it if I get it again. But for graphics, I use a lot of Canva. And I have a link to that in another presentation. What other questions do you have?
Q&A that says, this is all new to me. Where can you get one-on-one training or classes for social media?
I have a whole slide on other resources, so let's jump to that. But we can bounce back at any time. I'm super flexible. So this, in the realm of the 3 challenges that a lot of people shared, was I'm overwhelmed, which a strategy will address, hopefully, time, which a social media calendar will address. And the third common one was, even if I have those other 2 things, I don't have the skill set. I don't even know how to do it. I know what I want to do, but I don't know how. So there are a lot of other tools out there. This is one. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. The one I want to focus on, and it's a horrible slide, but don't worry about it. It's going to be sent to you. There is literally, for every platform that you're on, there's online training, and then there's nonprofit specific training. The key is, before you get to these, is to do that strategic analysis first to narrow down what you want to do. So as an example, when you talk about your audience, if you're not trying to reach other business people, don't worry about LinkedIn. Don't look up any LinkedIn training. Just don't do it. If that's really a business to business platform, you first have to narrow down what you want to post and who you want to see it. And then once you've narrowed that down, you can go to that platform, and there are tons of resources from Hootsuite to Loomly, YouTube. And when I send you these slides, this will all be linked in here. Quite often they'll do, like LinkedIn has a nonprofit consultant and you can schedule a chat with them, or they have webinars. But I beg of you to first narrow it down first to be as specific as possible what you want training on. Then dive into looking for it, and I guarantee you, you'll find it. So this slide will take you to a lot of those. These are just more cheats that I use, like Canva, the Noun Project for hashtags. So they're 2 separate sets of tools, but they're both, I think, pretty helpful. Anybody else want to raise their hand to ask questions on what we've covered so far? Because then I really want to leave time for just general questions. Okay. Eric, I'll count on you if somebody's raised your hand, or the Q&A, or Eleanor to stop me. So what I want to do, and still leave us about 15 minutes for just general questions if you have them, is after hearing all this, I'm hoping you came up with one earlier in the presentation, but what are the 3 things after hearing this presentation? It could be research training on Facebook how to post in Facebook. But what are 3 simple and attainable goals you could set for yourself for your social media planning based on what you've heard today? If you could write those down or share them in the chat. What are 3 things that I hope you're inspired to do today to help you not feel so overwhelmed, to help you make some more time for your planning, or to get the skills that you need to get your arms around your social media training? You may have already come up with one earlier in the class, but maybe 2 or 3 more based on what we've covered.
We have the webinar till 2:30.
And Allison, I can't hear you. So if you're saying it to me, I'm so sorry, but I can't hear you.
The webinar is till 2:30, so you've got some time.
Okay, good. So Catherine said, I'm inspired to do a yearly calendar. Honestly, if you do nothing else and you say, Amy, I'm never writing down 3 things for my social media, I don't have time. If you only write down 1, it's a social media planning tool of some kind. So thank you, Catherine. Okay. And there was a lot in the chat that I don't know that I went back to, but what I want to address also, and we have more time than I thought we might. So here's some things I'm conscientious of that we're not covering, but I want to touch on very quickly because the resources are out there. And you may see this list and go, oh, I already know how to do that. No, don't need it. Or you may say, oh, yeah, I need to get better at that. So that might be one of your 3 strategy goals. But make sure all of your accounts are set up as nonprofits. Make sure all your pricing is set up to receive nonprofit status. There are lots of resources out there for best practices for posting. How many sentences should it be? Is video better than pictures? How do I use a hashtag? There's quick blogs that you can read in 2 seconds, and then there's whole classes, but there's best practices for posting so that you get people's attention, you keep it, and then you motivate them to act. Do you all have a donation button set up on your social media platforms? If you don't, you should. I assume you all need money. You definitely should have a donation button set up or some way for folks to at any time send you money. Another one is, do you have social media guidelines and policies? If you have other people posting besides you, that's really important. It kind of falls under the last bullet of what's your policy about blocking users. We every so often get negative comments, usually from the same 3 people, but why aren't you helping people find homes? Why are you spending money on this instead? And so I've crafted kind of a generic response that I tweak, but it's to explain what our mission is as opposed to a direct service person. But you need a policy around that, especially if you have other people managing your social media, to be really clear on how to handle that. How do you run a hashtag campaign? Some of you said there was events that you're trying to promote. Hashtags are great for like being really creative. The other one that I think is super under, yes, I do have an example policy, and I will ask Eric and Allison to remind me, and I'll send that out when I send this out. Another thing that I think is really underutilized among the agencies in the chat, it was about getting more exposure, getting more engagement. I always say you get what you give. And if you're not out on other people's social media, liking and sharing and tagging and commenting, they're probably not going to come back to you. And it's not malicious. It's just the collaborative effort, the collaborative space in social media. So it's really important, like on Facebook, you're not just liking another agency's organization, but you're following it. And there's a way in Facebook where you can go and see everything that your other agencies that you're following are posting. And I go in and I like them, and I'll put a comment like, good luck with that event. And I'm genuine, like I mean it, or I'll share it. But you have to be collaborative. And when you're following somebody, to like what they're doing or to tag them, so that that back and forth creates some, I forgot the word, not just collaboration, but some engagement. But you have to do that for other folks, you know, to expect them to do it for you. And it just gets your brand out there to other agencies. I highly recommend that. I think it's really underutilized. A lot of times people don't know the difference. It's not your fault, but like between a like and a follow, you can like something and never see what they post. Christina, you definitely are training with me next time, but it says her posts have boosted all of our platforms tenfold in the last 30 days. So yeah, when I tag Mishta on a funding alert, that engagement on that post is tenfold. If I tag another agency. It's such a small time of yours once you know how to do it, but it goes a long way. Christina, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to notate something that has been really successful for all of us. So unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's been accepted in capacity yet at like Hootsuite or Loomly or anything like that. So it is a manual post, but on platforms such as Instagram or even Facebook now, they allow collaboration posts. So it shows that you've collaborated with another account, which allows you to expand your audience to both of those accounts. So for example, we do things with the Sterling Heights Police Department here at the Chaldean Community Foundation. So since we know people there on their social media team, we reach out to them before we post a collaborative post asking if we can collaborate with them. And as long as they accept in that collaboration, that post reaches both of our audiences and expands our reach to anyone else that may not have known who we are or what we do, or vice versa for them as well.
That is an awesome suggestion, and I've seen it, but I've not looked into it at all. And in the chat, when you guys were listing your list of the content, you know, somebody mentioned you work with Chamber of Commerce's, or you might work with a food bank, or who are your partners day to day. That is an excellent suggestion, not just to tag them at the you know, am I homeless like Micah, but to do that collaborative post. Thank you so much. I've not tried that, but I will. That's an excellent idea. The other things I acknowledge we don't have time to cover, but I just want to put it on your radar and maybe pick from this list some takeaways that you might want to focus on. Is a lot of both Facebook, Loomly, probably Hootsuite. We're not even getting into metrics and reports. For some of you, you're down the road a bit and that's important to you, but for other folks, don't even worry about it right now. You're just trying to get your social media calendar going and look at your likes, and that's enough. But there's some super easy tools to just pull some reports to say, hey, I tried this trick. And if you don't measure it, you know, you don't know if you're having success or not. They're pretty easily built into most of these platforms, and there's lots of training around it, but that you might want to make for a goal, like another quarter from now, after you've tried all this for a month, to start pulling some reports and see how that's affecting your engagement. And then the other piece we're not talking about at all today, but digital email. We use MailChimp. I have that in a collaborative format with our social media platform. So that's something to think about also. But I don't mean to like put these in front of you and then say we're not talking about them, but I did want to do it justice that there's a lot of other ancillary topics that I acknowledge. I didn't know where everybody was coming from and what they needed. So I wanted to say these are important elements too. All right. I'm hoping now we have more questions.
Christina does have her hand raised. I wasn't sure if that was still up from before.
Christina, did you have another comment?
Nope, she lowered it.
Okay. I'm quickly scrolling through the chat because there were some in here that I'm going to try to find. But while I'm doing that, does anyone want to share? These are the 3 things I'm going to try moving forward. Or I started at a pretty fundamental level, but I'm looking through here, and there are like comms directors, there's coordinators, that maybe there's a more elevated question that you have that you might want to ask that I didn't cover today. I'm really open to anything, and if I don't know it, I'll tell you and try to point you in the right direction. You guys just went out of here a half hour early, which I don't blame you.
Someone is asking if you use hashtags with every post, and someone else is asking how can we increase website views and visits via social media. And then we have a lot, so why don't you start with those 2?
Okay, are they in the Q&A or are they in the chat?
They're in the chat.
Okay,
folks
no
are using
problem.
the chat.
That's okay. Okay, for Wendy asked, like Catherine, should we use hashtags if we only use Facebook? You know, those algorithms change so often that the most recent thing I've heard is Facebook is not really recognizing hashtags. So in terms of boosting it for more people to see it in Facebook, no. I still use hashtags because I can give you an example. When I have an advocacy alert, I have a hashtag, the power of one, and I use it every time. Whether it boosts my post or not, I don't care. I want to remind people your voice counts. You have the power as one person to even just reach out to one legislator. So I still use the hashtag, the power of one. So I use them just from like a branding and a consistency point of view, so that if you even see the hashtag, the power of one, over time, people will know, oh, she's going to ask me to do something. So it kind of just gets your audience looking for that. I'm trying to think, I use like Membership Monday as a hashtag, so people get used to seeing this is going to be about membership. So I don't use them on every one though, but I do use them in that, like I told you, template that I have. About half of them have consistent hashtags. Did that answer your question? Yeah, and like Twitter and Instagram, that's different than what I just said about Facebook. So that's different. And Christina's right. When you get more into the metrics, you can see when you get a lot more engagement, you can go back and look and say, did I use a hashtag on that one or didn't I? Maybe that's why. I find a lot of times you don't know exactly what you did that you got more engagement, but it's good to track. One question, which is better, share a post from another agency or post it organically? I feel very strongly you need to do both. You're sharing it because as part of a good, you know, I want to say corporate citizen from the business world, but a nonprofit citizen, I'm here to elevate what you all are doing also. So I share them. But I'm also, my first and foremost responsibility is to elevate what Mike is doing. So I try to do a lot of both. And there's a way in Facebook under your feed that you go into and you can see what everybody else has posted. And so I pick and choose from there what I post. You know, I can't do every mobile food bank thing, but I pick and choose through there what I try to repost directly from other organizations. Catherine asks, when posting to thank several donors, do you tag them all in the post? I do both. I try to do individually and then include their logo and a link to their website. That's like best case scenario. And I need to do that today for the Breakfast of Champions. And then sometimes just to do a group one, I'll just do the link at the bottom, but don't do 6 pictures with it because that just looks messy. So if you only have 2 or 3, I would do them separately with their logo and a link to their website. They will appreciate that. Thank you for the questions. I really wanted to spend more time doing this than talking, so I appreciate it. How often is best for posting? Meg, I don't know. A lot of it's going to be driven by your time and the content that you have. And don't post just to post. I mean, your reader is got 1,000 other things they're looking at on their social media posts. And so you want it to be of value. So it comes down to what's going to be of value to them and what do you have time to post? And I'm going to take Christina's answer on TikTok or whatever she says, because I don't use that, but I love hashtags. I just think it creates like a branding and a consistency around it. And like for our Breakfast of Champions, I can see who's reposted that. And yes, what Christina said as well. It's really quality over quantity.
Someone did ask earlier how you can get one-on-one help, and I did want to say that I don't know where that person was from, but the Platinum COC membership comes with 2 hours of training from Amy that Micah has. So,
which I totally forgot about, which is why Allison is here.
so if
Yes.
you are a COC or you're a COC member and you can get your COC to join as a member at the Platinum level, yep, you get 2 hours with Amy.
And you didn't hear me say this. I'll probably do more than 2. I'm not going to leave you hanging, but I love coaching people on this and I try to make it as accessible as possible. Any other questions?
let us know if we missed your question, since they're in the chat, they're hard to keep track of. But just retype your question if we missed you.
And the recording will be available. We'll get it back out pretty quickly. The slides will be available. You can email me with a particular question if you want. So I think there's a way you can just like do a little emoji. So Christy, you have to be on Facebook where the social media calendar is located. You have to be in the business manager, which I can share my screen and show you, but it's not just on the regular page. You have to, it's over to the left, but you have to have it in a certain view. Just by doing a thumbs up or thumbs down, and I'm not going to take this personally, but I just want to see how you're feeling about it. Do you feel, after just thinking about the analysis, putting some goals together, do you feel a little less overwhelmed moving forward with your social media? And be honest, does this make you feel more overwhelmed now that I've gone through all these questions and tools and links, or how are you feeling about it, just moving forward, coming up with 2 to 3 things that you could do to get your arms around this? And the other question I would have for you to put in your notes or pull up your Google Calendar is, I didn't touch on this in the slide, but I honestly wasn't sure how much time, and I wanted to be respectful of you all. In addition to the social media planning calendar, if you're not the sole person managing your social media, but you're in some other capacity, and I tried to read them as you introduced yourself, I am begging you to go to your calendar of just your general work calendar and block out X amount of time per week, like an appointment in your calendar to say social media planning. For me, it's like exercise. If I don't write it down, it is never going to happen if it's not in my calendar. So please block out some time, because if you come up with your 3 tasks today, but you never make time to get back to them after this training, which we're all human, who hasn't done that, you're never going to do it. So maybe once every 2 weeks, if that works for you. Maybe it's Friday at 3 o'clock when you want to do something fun and creative and not the other tasks that you're focused on the week. Do it whatever works best for you and how your brain works. You've got to have a dedicated media day or it won't happen. And you just start out with a half hour, make it really manageable, and just pick one of your goals that you chose for today. And that's the only one you work on. Or if you have staff meetings, if it's not an agenda item about social media planning that says, what do y'all need posted this week or this month or this quarter? What information do you need to get me in order to do that? This needs to be kind of like a pillar of your planning on staff meetings, so that people are thinking that way, even if it's not their day-to-day job, if you're reliant on them to get you the information. So calendar it and make it an ongoing agenda item for steering committees, staff meetings, that you get feedback. You could take these questions I posed to you today and throw it out to your group and see what they say. So those are 2 points I apologize I didn't have earlier about making time to do this. Catherine said it makes her feel behind the ball. And that is the one thing I didn't want people to feel like when they sat down for this, because I get it. Like, there's just a lot to do, but if you can make this as granular as possible, because Catherine, you may have typed it, but I guarantee you of the, 70 people that were here, you're not the only one. Just pick one thing. Just pick one thing from today that you could start with. And so if it's to make a calendar, then just do that. And then next week, pick something else. You're not behind the ball, because at least you're at the training and now you have some steps in place that you can do moving forward. So start small, it's not even small, but just start with one thing. All right. I don't want to keep you just to keep you to 2:30. Is there anything else through the
There's
Q&A?
another question from,
Thanks.
in the Q&A.
Catherine, can you explain more what you mean? I'm sorry, I don't know about shortcut instructions, what that means. You can go off mute maybe to elaborate.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I was thinking like shortcuts when I'm working in creating posts on Facebook, it's like, okay, how do I do this? Or you talked about how do you link the logo for a donor? I don't know how to do that.
Okay, that's okay. It may take some time up front, but the simplest thing is to Google, how do I add an image to a Facebook post? Just type in Google exactly what it is you don't know how to do. I'm shameless about it. You'd be amazed what I've been able to figure out. And there'll
Okay.
be some help instructions there. Just type it in Google. Don't even go to the Facebook help thing because that can be like Byzantine to try to find what you want. Just type it in. How do I add an image to a Facebook post? And it'll be there. And if there's 2 or 3 things that you struggle with, just email me or reach out to me, like these 3 or 4 things, and then I can link some simple help files if it's the same 3 or 4 things over and over. But in general, just type it in Google and you'll get some help. And Ashley, I'll grab that. And I get a lot of digital emails from COCs, but I'd have to go look at their social media or their Facebook pages. I don't have a good answer, but I'll grab that out of the chat. And between Allison and I will get back with you on that, because that goes back to that messaging and like, how do you promote that? And sometimes it's hard to curate that message. All right.
Or
it
if
is-
there's any other COCs here that want to share, feel free. Luna has their hand up to speak. Did you have a question, Luna? You are allowed to, I unmuted you.
Hi, yes, thank you. I have a question about the social media platforms that we use. I think we do a pretty good job with our Facebook. We do have a calendar, we do post consistently, and we have put together an analysis. And something that we've thought a lot about is pressing on to other platforms like Instagram and Twitter. But we are fairly small. And I'm just curious if that is actually something that we should, that would add value to the work that we do, you know, using Instagram for an example, is that going to help, you know, press on our message, or is it
Yeah.
actually just going to add more stress to our staff trying to maintain another platform? Like, where do we find?
Right. You're so
Yeah.
smart to even ask that question, because I think a lot of times people feel pressured and like, I have to be everything everywhere, and it's just not feasible. So that slide prior that lists a lot of the social media platforms, it gives you what they're best suited for. So like Instagram, I don't have a lot of great pictures within Micah of like actual people. We don't use Instagram because we're not image heavy. So I don't use it at all. But so I think I would go back to that slide that gives you the descriptions. They're best suited for very different things. If you love video and you have a lot of events that you take video at, maybe TikTok is for you. So the other thing I would ask yourself is, what audience are you trying to reach? That will drive a lot of what platform you should be on. If it's other businesses, I would go to LinkedIn and I would start following the other businesses on LinkedIn and then start posting to LinkedIn. So the 2 things are, who are you trying to reach? That will drive where you should go. What you're going to post. So if it's image heavy, you want Instagram. If it's to younger people, you want Instagram. If it's to really young people, like Snapchat. And that will help drive where. In terms of time, I'm going to go back to Hootsuite. You literally go into this portal and do one post, and then you check the 3 places you want it to go. So to me, it's really easy. I do one post and I push it out to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter all at one time. I edit the Twitter post, obviously, because you have limited characters, and I'll do different hashtags for Twitter, but I'm still only doing it one time. So you can save yourself with that Hootsuite or Loomly to push it out to multiple platforms. Once you decide where that should be, it won't really take you any more time than it is now to post it. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you for asking it, because I think it's a smart question, and I think it's one a lot of people have. Any other questions in the Q&A or the chat?
We do not have any more questions. I think you got them all.
Okay, cool. Whoops. Thank you to my teammates for helping me manage all this. I'm gonna stop sharing, but that's my Hootsuite screen. I'm not gonna keep you just to keep you then. You have my email address, and it was a pleasure chatting with you. I'm sorry with the Zoom platform, it's hard to see everybody and engage, but I hope you got something out of it, and we'll send you a copy of the presentation. We will have this back out on YouTube if you want to take bits and pieces of it.